Welcome. Good morning.
Thank you very much.
So I'm not going to do much talking today because clearly I've lost the ability to do it. This is, I think, my third live this week, and obviously it's something that's checked out on a bank holiday Friday. So, Krista, tell us a little bit about your story. So you've been with Flying Changes now. This is your second year as an ambassador. We love having you on the team. It's been an absolute fun-filled journey. So tell us a little bit about why you got in touch with us when you did, and what it's all been about for you for the last year and a bit, nearly a half.
It was a random time that I applied to you, actually. So I originally saw the post on Facebook, saw it once and then sort of ignored it because I was like, I'm just not good enough to be a brand ambassador, so no. And friends had worked with you before, so I knew a little bit about you. And I thought, you know what, sod it, I am actually going to apply. And I was really struggling with my competing. So I'm super competitive naturally as a person. And I had an amazing dressage horse who I'd had on loan. We'd worked really hard together. We were starting to go out competing. And it was all fine when I put no pressure on myself. But as soon as something went okay, that's it. I was like, right, I need to qualify for this. I must do this. So now I can do that. And I didn't realise the impact it was having. I knew that something happened to me the moment I went out of the warm-up into the competition arena. I'd had my trainers come and watch me. No one could kind of figure out what was going on apart from I just went like this and didn't really breathe. So no one could help me. So I knew it had to be something to do with my head. So that's why I was going to start the journey anyway, but I thought, right, take the opportunity and see if Jenny can sort out my head.
So tell us a little bit about that journey then, because I think we sort of got there really, didn't we? And then all sorts of things happened along the way, as they do. But tell us a little bit about the kind of stuff that really helped you with that.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone on a real random journey from sorting out my whole life basically. So that's probably been the biggest benefit of working with you, is that it's not just, I think you were talking about in your live this morning, it's not just about my riding. Actually, it was about everything that I was doing outside of that. So it's had little kind of impacts in everything that I'm doing, which has been really great. But for me, I think I didn't quite appreciate how much of a fixed mindset I had around competing. So you gave me a lovely book to read. And I thought, I had an amazing, I'm really open-minded generally in life. So I thought, I had a great growth mindset. I'm reading this book thinking, yeah, growth mindset, fixed mindset. No, definitely not me, 100% not. But as I started reading it, and I didn't realise that you can have fixed elements in part of your life. So I was reading it thinking, oh, actually, hang on. I think I might have a fixed mindset around competing, because it was all about the percentage and all about the success that was driving it. It wasn't about, if I made a mistake, I would beat myself up for days, weeks, months, and it was ruining my competing experience. I'm not a professional rider. I do this as my hobby, although I am super competitive. I want to do well, but it's not how I pay my mortgage. So I needed to have fun and get the fun back, and I'd lost all of that. I was just chasing scores, and then this frustration was building, because the more I chased the scores, the worse I was performing. I was doing brilliantly in training at home, and everyone kept saying to me, oh, you should be getting 70%, you should be doing this. And I was like, I know I should, but I can't. So it wasn't the skill, it was all up here. And so to understand and change the way that I was thinking about competing, and we put in some really key things. And for me, it's those 3 things that I need to focus on rather than getting in the warm-up. And I know all of the girls have kind of mentioned this, like you go in the warm-up and be like, oh, that horse over there is going really well. I changed it and almost did the Nadia thing of being overconfident in the warm-up. And I need to be that person in the warm-up. I'm the bitch in the warm-up. I don't know if I'm allowed to say bitch, but sorry. I ride, I keep on my line. I don't let people distract me. I am super uber focused. And that's how I have to be to cope with things. I do, however, say to other competitors, if I think they've got a nice jacket, or I think their horse is going really well, they're having a bit of a crap time, I will say to them, chill, like, you look really good, I love your boots, I love this, your horse looks fab, or whatever, I will try, and even though I'm like focused, I try and be nice as well, occasionally.
It's
So
interesting that though, isn't it? That just because you're focused on something doesn't mean, I mean, I know you said you were a bitch, and yes, you can say that. But just because you're focused on it, it doesn't mean that you have to be a horrible person. It just means that you're in your zone, you're on your goal. And I think the fact that you actually will sometimes say to someone something, you pop out your bubble for a little bit, you make a nice comment because actually you don't want to be seen as this horrible person, and you certainly don't run people down. You're just very clear about what it is you want. There's a fine line with that, isn't there?
yeah, there really is. And I think because I'd spent such a long time with my other horse buddy, he was a nightmare in the walk. He got smacks in the face with a whip as a 4-year-old. So every time he'd be on the inside track, if anything came cantering towards us, he would spin and go in the other direction. So I was uber conscious of everybody around me, and that was for my own safety, obviously. But it became too much. But with Bella, she doesn't care, and she's hilarious in the world. She just rides at people. I almost have to I'm like, oh, sorry. She takes over and she just loves it. So yeah, I have my 3 things that I think about. I keep it really simple. I chant them in the lorry on the way. So I think about it. I'm not very good at visualization because I was doing it before, but all I was doing was visualizing a red ribbon. I didn't realize I was actually doing it wrong. That's not what you're actually supposed to do. So I started riding through my test in my head, and thinking, all right, I need to do a half halt here. I need to put my leg on here. I need to think about the bend here. And that's how you're actually supposed to visualize, rather than like, which is great. So yeah, so I think of my 3 things, and then I went I think I went to Parwood, and we'd been working together for about 5 months, and I think it was just after I'd read the book, and I was like, right, I've got my new system, that's it, I'm going to go and nail it, everything is good. And I had, right, it's a new venue, Bella's not been there before, I need to focus on my 3 things. So I had it. And I came out of the test and I thought I'd nailed it. I was so happy. People were saying to me, you did a great job, well done. I was like, whoop, whoop, yeah, got me. Jenny and me nailed it. Anyway, I went to the scoreboard and my face was like this. What the hell? What did I get, 55% or something? And honestly, I was furious. And my old fixed mindset came back to little horn me. So I wasn't right. This is right at the beginning of this journey. So I wasn't really prepared, and I got really angry. Then I got really upset. Then we had a session. You sorted me out and was like, was it really the judge's fault? Was she there? And so I had a bit of a recheck. But then, so that was in the May, I think. And then in the June, I went out at elementary, and from that was novice, I got 55 in. And so people around me were like, why are you doing elementary when you're really crap at novice? But all my trainers have been telling me, you have to go out elementary. She's a advanced horse, so you have to just crack on. So I was like, right, I trust in the training, I trust in what I'm doing, let's go. And obviously you had my back too, to make sure that I wasn't thinking that I was doing something stupid. And we went from a personal worst score to, by November, we were smashing 70%. But the journey along the way, people were thinking that I was a weirdo, that I was on drugs, because they knew me from before, where I was so focused and would be really angry if I didn't get a great score or win. And then we went to the Festival of Dressage at Sparshall with my friend, and I didn't have a great test. She was tight, she was tense, whatever, but I hit all of my personal objectives. So I was skipping around like I'd won the Olympics. My friend's like, what are you on? Like, who are you? And I'm like, look, I've got a ribbon and it's a pink one. I came fifth, woo woo. And I was really happy because pink, I like pink. So I was like a kid. I was like 11 years old skipping around. And I think after that, my friend also started having sessions with you. So yeah, so it's been a crazy journey, really. But I love it. I love competing now. I've gone from hating it, well, not hating it. I thought I enjoyed it, but I love it. I'm like a kid going out. I don't care what score I get. I'm sure that will change. This year has been, well, last year was about, consolidating my mind, and just getting that right. But as a result, the work is getting better at a show. And so, yeah, we're moving onwards and upwards once we get out of this horrible lockdown.
Yeah, indeed. And you're really lucky though, aren't you? Because about the horrible lockdown, you've got your ponies at home with you, haven't you? And you're building an incredible place there with some really interesting stuff. So tell us a bit more about that then.
So yes, you're right. I suppose I need to start at the beginning really of my my journey. So I have already mentioned Buddy. He was my old competition horse. He's still around, but he's semi-retired now. But well, 9 years ago, he was 6 years old and he was diagnosed with navicular. Now, I was obviously devastated. I'd lost a horse 2 years before because of a massive DDFT tear. So I was just thinking, oh God, it's all happening all over again. And it was awful. We did, all the treatment, steroid injections into the feet. I did remedial shoeing. I tried everything and nothing was working. To be fair, I didn't try it for a really long time, but I already knew that it just, if those things are going to work, they're going to work quick, and it just wasn't happening. So when Legend, my old horse, was injured, I'd heard, a friend had told me about this place called Rockley Farm. It wasn't appropriate for him, so he didn't go. But I thought, right, okay, maybe Buddy could go. And at this stage, my vet had said to me, look, you're going to have to put him down, or he can hack probably on Bew and maybe do some light dressage if you're really, really lucky. But you're never going to be able to do. I brought him to events, so he was never going to do what I wanted him to do. My gut feeling was saying, I just don't believe you. So, which I know some people think is crazy nuts, but trust me, I was obviously right. So I sent him to Rockley Farm and he was there for 12 weeks. He was sound in, well, he was heel first, which is how you want them to land, after 6 weeks, and then he was sound within 8 weeks, and I was back out competing. So he went there in the November, I was back out competing in the April. And ever since then, he has, we show jumped for our county, he's done BD, he's evented, he's hunted. He is just, he's just amazing. And he's the horse that's changed my life, and I could get quite emotional and cry about it, because he's really special. And although he didn't hit my dreams of getting me into tails again, he's completely changed the way that my life has gone and the direction that my life has gone in. And so he has been the inspiration around from the ground up. So this is something that I am starting to do. So as Jenny said, I've got the horses at home. The plan always was to build a track system and have a rehab place here. The plan is going to be really, low key in terms of numbers of horses. So I'm only going to have a few because I want to give a really personalized service to the people that come here, because it's really hard. Rockley, I owe Nick everything, because otherwise Buddy would have been put down. But I missed him terribly. Rockley is in Devon, and I was super lucky. I could go every 2 weeks to go and see him. My husband loved me so much, driving 4 hours every other weekend. But we made of it what we had to at the time. But because of that, I really missed him, and I wanted to see him every day. I'd gone from seeing him every day to having nothing. And as I say, I was really lucky. Other owners don't see their horses for 12 weeks, sometimes longer. And so for me, I want to do it slightly differently and just allow owners to engage on a daily basis with their horses, on an hourly basis if they want to. So we've got kind of webcams through the track system that the owners can access, and they will be able to engage with me directly on a kind of a daily basis. But this is all in the future. This isn't happening right now, unfortunately. But yeah, that's the plan. And yeah, we'll get there at some point soon.
So that's the future plan, which we love. We love to have a future vision, don't we? Because having a future vision gives us something to motivate us to get over the difficult things, to overcome the challenges. So tell us a little bit about what's going on now with From the Ground Up and what you're doing, and tell us some stuff about that.
So I qualified as a equine sports and rehabilitation massage therapist a couple of years ago, and originally I did that because Buddy had an injury with his neck, so he's got calcification of the nuchal ligament, which is why he's semi-retired now, and he just won't let anybody else anywhere near him. So I thought, right, I can help him, but as a consequence, obviously horses going through rehab, their bodies change. Now Bella she got steroid-induced laminitis in November, and so she's been through a recovery period since then, and I've been able to treat her 3 times a week, because obviously the body massively changes when it's compensating for an issue, particularly in the feet, and that can be front feet or back feet, but you will see patterns within the body where the horse is obviously changing its weight, and so I can try and, you know, help adjust that. And, you know, there are so many things when a horse is going through rehab, and particularly, you know, navicular and front feet issues are generally caused by the fact that the horse isn't moving in the right way. Now, what I mean by that is a horse should be landing in, a barefoot horse should land heel first. So heel down, heel down. Now, a shod horse will land heel first, but it's rarer in a shod horse just because of the weight of the shoe. So you want them to be landing as flat as possible, and it normally is kind of like this. Horses with navicular and other issues tend to land toe first. Now that can be for a whole host of reasons, but if a horse has got a long toe, underrun heels, contracted heels, just the way that they're moving is changing. Now, if you can identify this is a real early warning system. So if your horse is landing toe first, that doesn't mean they've got navicular and they're gonna, you know, you don't have to panic, but you do need to do something to change it, otherwise they will get ligament issues and then bone issues. So what I really want to do is help horses and owners understand those early warning systems. Now that can be through the musculature. If your physio or body worker, whoever you use, starts to say to you, okay, we're seeing, you know, there's always a tension behind the saddle, you've had the saddle checked, you've had, you know, vet checks, everything done, maybe start to look at how your horse is actually moving. Now most physios and body workers should walk your horse up before and after every treatment anyway. Some don't, but that's personal preference. However, you can do it yourself. So just by walking your horse away and back towards you, you know, everyone, well, most people have got smartphones, so they've got like slow-mo function on there now. So you can film it, you want them literally walking straight in front of you, get on the ground, video them, and then you can slow it right down and watch the footfall. And if you have any concerns, one, speak to your hoof care provider, whether that's a farrier or a trimmer, and just say to them, look, you know, I'm seeing this, should I be concerned? Now, a lot of people are worried about talking to their providers because they feel they're the professional. And I was there. And I have to say, if I had have questioned a bit harder when I thought Buddy wasn't right, I probably wouldn't have been where I am. So, you know, there's good things to that and bad things to that. But my farrier told me I was wrong, and I wasn't, I was right. So don't, just because you're professional is your professional. If something's telling you there's something else going on, just do a bit of digging. And my favorite thing that I always tell all of my clients, why? Ask why. And if someone cannot explain to you why they're doing something, they don't know why they're doing it either. And so that then becomes your responsibility as an owner to say, okay, whoa, like we might need to change the path that we're on. And whether that's, you know, working with your farrier to find a new way, or your vet, because this happens to vets too. My vet told me I was crazy, and now he sent, I think, 35 horses to Rockley. So so, you know, you can help educate as long as you do it in the right way, and it must not be confrontational or, you know, trying to let them think that you know better, because they've got a huge wealth of experience, and you wading in saying, oh, I've read about this thing on Facebook, that's automatically going to put their back up. So work with them and say, look, I want to understand why my horse is doing this, and most professionals will work with you in that way, and if they don't, they're not the right professional for you, so it's time to find somebody else. So that was a long rant.
No, that's amazing. No, I love it. And I love the way that you look at this, because that's slightly different to most people. Most people will say, listen to your professional and do as you're told. And I love the fact that you're saying, well, yeah, I mean, they are a professional, they've got a wealth of knowledge, but no one knows everything. Some people have missed some information. I love the fact that you said to your vet, you know, I'm not quite sure about this. And you do get a gut feeling when it comes to your animals. You do know whether or not you kind of think the person that's telling you it is really right, or whether there might be something more. Or, you know, often, so many times when I've spoken to people about their stories with horses, they said, I just kind of knew that wasn't really it, or that wasn't really right. And so what do you do in that circumstance? Well, you can go and get a second opinion, can't you? Or you can just kind of start looking into other things and other information. But, you know, Google is a wonderful and dangerous thing at the same time, isn't it?
Completely. And I think, you know, you are your horse's advocate, and so you are the only person who has got their back. And so if you don't think something's right, I mean, I've had it before, you know, I've seen something, or my horse is acting in a slightly weird way. One of my old horses, I'd had a lesson, he'd been fab, tied him up in the yard, and he just wasn't eating his hay net. And I called the vet because I knew he was colicking. And the vet was like, you're mental. And then he was like, oh, actually, you're not so mental. But we spend every day, the vets and other professionals just don't. And so, I mean, when I speak to my massage clients, I always ask them, is there anything you're worried about, anything they're doing a bit weird? Because I just want to know, because sometimes I will find things in the body and then I can be, okay, that makes sense because they're doing that now. And then I can say, don't, you know, just keep an eye on it. If they start doing it again, we need to treat them. And yeah, it's a really fine line, I think, between spouting to your professional. You have to trust them. And I work with an amazing hoof care provider. I get him down from Northumberland, a guy called Steve Lee. He's insane, and I will always trust him. Actually, we never clash on judgment, so I can't say that. But I've been working with him the whole way along since Rockley. And it's really important that you have, and I know other people have spoken about it, you know, having those people in your team that have your back are so important. And everyone that I work with understands, you know, my mentality. I need to know why they're doing certain things. I'm very conscious of working with the whole horse, hence why we're called From the Ground Up, because everything starts from the hoof and then kind of echoes in the rest of the body. But all my people that I work with have the same ethos as me. You know, they understand where I'm coming from. And again, that's really important, because I'm not uber traditional. I am very open-minded. I listen to my horses. I do crazy wacky stuff. You know, I don't have crystals and stuff hanging in my woods yet, but I might do one day if I think that's a benefit. So, you know, I am totally horse driven. You know, I will be led by what they tell me. You know, everything doesn't work for all horses. I've had, you know, clients that I've told, I can't treat your horse, not because I can't do it, it's because the horse just doesn't like me. We just don't vibe together. And there's no point in working with a horse who, if I'm making him tense and upset, I'm undoing all the work that I'm trying to do. So, you know, and they're wasting their money spending it with me. So again, you just have to go with the flow and read the horse in front of you would be my probably biggest advice.
Cool. Okay, that's amazing. Thank you. And I love the fact that you've touched on the fact that you are open to all kinds of things, because horses are these incredible creatures that work on levels that we just don't understand at all most of the time. And it doesn't mean that you have to be running naked through the woods wafting crystals and incense around. I mean, you might want to do that. That's fair, you know. Yeah, it's totally an option. And I'm sure probably at some point this weekend you may even... No, okay, fine. But what I love about your ethos, and I really share it with you, and there's some great comments coming through as well about how we have to listen to our horses. They haven't read the book. We need to work as a team. We need to think about them and listen to them. They love the fact that you say you're your horse's advocate, like your best advocate. Yeah. I just want you to tell us a little bit about your ethos around feet. So you and so I've got barefoot horse as well, and I've always decided to take my horses barefoot. And yes, I also still want to compete in affiliated levels and doing different things and have them as a really capable all-rounder and able to do stuff. And it's not always the easiest thing to do, that's for sure. I mean, you have to be at the moment really quite strong from a mindset perspective, actually, sometimes to get over. I mean, certainly there was a lot of questions around why I took my 6-year-old perfectly healthy Irish sports horse who had no problems with his feet, why I took his shoes off when he didn't have a problem. And my answer was always, well, that's why I've taken them off, because he doesn't have a problem. So I'm taking them off now so I don't cause one later. And that was my ethos. Now, barefoot's one of these things, isn't it? Like, there are the evangelists out there, aren't there? They're the people that think you are the...
You can call
Sorry?
them barefoot Taliban.
The barefoot Taliban. Yeah, we can call them that, though. And these are, you know, people that think you are the cruelest person in the world, nailing metal on a horse's foot and all this, that, and the other. And, you know, there's always extremists and everything, isn't there? And these people exist. And unfortunately can give barefoot a bad name sometimes. But what I love about your ethos is the way that you, the same as I, share this value of do what's best for the horse. So tell us a little bit about what really drives your idea of hoof health and what's best for the horse in relation to that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's been a real journey, and I think the mindset, I wish I'd known you then when I took Buddy barefoot, because I had some really horrible people around me as well who were telling me that I couldn't do this and I would never do this and I couldn't achieve, and I'd never be able to canter a 20-meter circle on grass. And for me, I knew where they were coming from, because I understand from their own personal journeys, I know why they were saying what they were saying. However, it was really hard, and I spent the weeks leading up to Buddy going to Rockley, I sobbed into his mane in his stable every night, because I was like, what am I supposed to do? Do I just shoot him? That was literally my only other option. Send him to Rockley or shoot him. And for me, that wasn't an option. So I personally keep all my horses barefoot. All 3 of them are. So I've got Buddy, he's obviously never going to be shod again. Bella, I got 3 years ago. She was shod all round when I got her. And Dancer is my rising 4-year-old. She's never had shoes on. My personal preference always is unshod. However, I'm always driven by the horse. Bella, when I got her, she was shod all round. She had very poor quality hoof growth. So I would have been an absolute idiot if I'd pulled her shoes off and just expected her to carry on performing. So I did take her out on the road hacking and scared myself so much I'd forgotten how slippery it is riding a shod horse on the road. So I immediately took her back shoes off. I didn't really care. I needed, for my own, I was really scared. So I don't know how you guys do it. I took her back shoes off, but we were on a traditional livery yard. Then our turnout was limited, and she had some issues with her gut that I wanted to get sorted. Now, there is a real correlation I've personally found, and you're starting to see a bit more stuff in the veterinary journals and that kind of thing about hoof health and gut health. They are intrinsically linked. And so for her, I needed to get her diet right. Diet is incredibly important for a barefoot horse. You need to have low sugar, starch. I feed all mine kind of the traditional old school way of straights. But again, personal preference. Just make sure you're not feeding your horse rubbish. Look at the feed label is all I would say to you, and do some education. If anyone wants any feed advice, drop me a line. I'm not a nutritionist, but I know enough. So back to hoof health. So Bella, we had to get her gut right, I had to get her diet right, and just try and encourage her feet to go in the right way. So I kept her shod in front, because if I'd have taken her shoes off, she had very thin soles, I would have crippled her. And my plan always was to get her home and start to encourage her to have the right type of movement before I pulled her shoes off. As it turned out, she pulled both her front shoes off within 3 days of being home, and I was like, you know what, that's a sign from God, so I'm gonna run with it. And ironically, despite her not being a rehab, I mean, she was meant to be my PSG schoolmaster when I got her. She has been the hardest one of all to transition, and with all the stuff that's happened over the last few months, I have had moments where I thought, oh my God, and people have said to me, why don't you just put shoes on? Because it would just be easier. But for me, the feet work as an early warning system. And so with horses being barefoot, if they become a little bit footy, you can do something to change it. Obviously, if you have a shoe in between the foot and the ground, then you don't find out about stuff like that until it's a little bit too late. Now, with Bella, if she'd have been shod, she had shock-induced steroid laminitis. She came in, they were out overnight at that point. She came in, I was a bit worried about her. She looked a bit that she was moving a bit short on one of her front legs. But I thought I'll just leave her, bring her in. I went and checked her at lunchtime, and her pulses in her front feet were bounding. So there was maybe 4 hours in between me thinking, oh, she's not quite right, to full-on laminitis. And I was lucky. I caught it really early. If I hadn't, I think that would have been it for her, to be honest. So, you know, that's my ethos. However, as I said, it's so hard to keep a horse barefoot, particularly if they're not perfect. I mean, Dancer, she's never had shoes on. I think I could feed her like full on molasses. She could just lick it off a stick, and she'd still stay like rock crunching. But she's never had shoes on. She moves beautifully, so there's no kind of conformation issues for her there. But you know, Bella, she looks at something and she's like crippled, and you know, each horse has to do their own thing. Now, I know what I'm doing. If I didn't, and I reckon if I was on a livery yard right now, or with all the stuff that Bella's gone on, I would have really, really struggled to keep her shoes off, because everyone would have had an opinion about what I was doing. But I don't, so I could do my own thing. But that's, you know, again, being your horse's advocate, that would be the only thing that would keep me going. And for me, I knew what benefit was I going to get for putting shoes on her. Well, one, I probably would have caused concussive issues by hammering nails in, so I would have had to go down the glue-on route, and the likelihood is with all the mud we had, she probably wouldn't have kept those on anyway. So boots and pads and gentle movement were her solution. But I knew that. I've got a wealth of experience. I've done this before. So, you know, for other people who, you know, take their horse's shoes off and think, oh, you know, barefoot isn't just taking shoes off and hoping for the best and cracking on working. You know, their feet adjust to growth. I do a lot of work, you know, transitional work in terms of building them up, slowing them down. It's the same. I mean, I'm old school. I used to keep my pony on like a racing yard. So we used to do all of the old school fitness work. You know, they'd have off, you know, 3 months in the winter with no shoes on, then you start to bring them back in and do all the walk work, you know, when you're getting ready to event. And I treat it very much like that. You have to condition a horse's feet the same as you have to condition their body. There is no quick fix. You must just take your time. And if you want a quick fix, put some shoes on. And I don't mean that in a, well, I suppose I do mean that in some people will just put shoes on and just la la la, everything's fine. However, I do believe that a lot of horses do need support from shoes. Now, that's not to say I don't believe that all horses can't be barefoot, because most horses can. That's a fact. However, most owners and situations mean that it's incredibly difficult, if not impossible. Some horses have metabolic issues, which again make it incredibly difficult to get their diet right. They cannot even tolerate grass. And I mean, again, for me, you need to do a balance of perfection versus reality. And some horses, I mean, if I couldn't turn my horses out, they'd be absolutely miserable. And so if that meant that I had to put some shoes on, then do you know what? I put some shoes on so they can go out and actually live a nice life. If your circumstances do not allow you, I mean, I'm blessed. I know I am, because my horses are off grass most of the time. The grass that I have is perfect because I reseeded it and did it all myself. But even so, you know, I appreciate that. And I know that that's not everybody's reality. I think a lot of yard owners are, and particularly with, you know, the space issues that we're having with turnout, I think a lot of owners are starting to switch on to, you know, track mentality and thinking, okay, you know, if you have an all-weather track, it doesn't actually have to be that long. I think my track right now, my winter track was about 200 meters long for 3 horses, but because of the way I've stationed the water at one end, there's hay stations all along, I'm constantly encouraging them to move. So it doesn't have to be long, but you have to just enrich them in a different way. And I think actually, if more owners, livery yard owners, looked at this, they would probably get a lot more value out of the land that they've got right now, particularly the equicentral systems whereby you can have access to paddocks and that kind of thing. But I think based on the couple of winters that we've had, it's looking like they're going to be wetter and wetter and wetter. And so we need to start thinking about other ways to keep our horses, because it is not good enough to keep them in stables from October to March. That's not okay. They need to be moving, they need to be active and doing other things. So yeah, I'd say I'm probably more passionate about getting your horse out of the box than shoes versus non-shoes.
Cool. Okay, and let's have a look at some myths then. So let's debunk some, because I know, obviously, having barefoot horses myself, I'm always getting told all sorts of crappy things from people. So I think some of the myths, some of the things that you come across, like for instance, I was always told, well, my horse doesn't do much. My horse does too much road work, so its feet are going to wear down. Tell us about that one, and then I'll ask you some more as well as we go, because I've got loads of great ones.
I had someone tell me I was going to wear my horse's feet down to bleeding stumps if I carried on doing the work I was doing. So I think in the summertime I use the road as a trimming tool. I don't trim, well, that's a lie, I do trim now a little bit, because Buddy doesn't get the same level of work that he used to do, but I use the road to do my self-trimming, because my ethos, again, self-trimming is a Rockley thing. It's not appropriate again for all horses, but for me it works. It allows them to grow the hoof that they need to grow, and Buddy's got a really interesting conformation issue with his hoof, where he needs to have a little millimetre extra just on the lateral inside edge, just to help him keep his stability. That's obviously compensating for an issue we can't see. So I don't know what I was saying. Oh yeah, bleeding stumps on the road. So Buddy does about 15 miles a week in the summer on the road. Bella does a little bit less because she hates hacking, but she would do more if not. But again, as I said earlier, it's about, if I took a horse's shoes off and did 15 miles on the road, yes, they would be absolutely crippled. It's about adjusting and transitioning the horse's wear to the horse's growth, and they adapt incredibly quickly. The Rockley rehabs did a ride across the Ridgeway, and they were seeing the horses over the weekend. The horse's growth had sped up over the weekend to adapt for the fact that they were doing extra miles, even though they'd done obviously all the conditioning and training work prior to doing the ride. The horse just instantly adapted its feet, and that for me is like unreal. I find that fascinating, that the hoof can adapt so quickly, and also terrifying that we nail a bit of metal on that stops it moving. But yeah, my other favourite one that I'm told by all the big dressage trainers, so Spencer Wilton told me this, and Andrew Gould, I had a very interesting conversation with them about this, that I need more support for my horse doing more advanced movement to have shoes on. And I said, okay. I asked why. I said, why do you think that might be? And they said, well, you need the shoe to support the foot, to carry the weight behind and do it. I was like, okay. I had to put my face on, like, don't be like, and so I said, okay, just tell me how a shoe, which is like 1/4 millimetre of an inch of steel or whatever, just tell me how that gives more support than the world. Their faces were like, oh. And that's a great one. The earth is, I don't know how big it is, it's massive, but the earth gives far more support than a 1/4 inch of steel ever will. Now if you're talking about compensating for other issues within the body, then that's a completely different conversation, and again, there are other ways you can support your horse rather than putting shoes on. But again, different strokes for different folks. If your horse needs to have a pair of shoes on to do the work that he's doing, then that's fine. But do not be fooled that shoe is giving additional support, because it's not.
Great, thank you. Okay, so another one that I get told all the time is, well, I don't want to be riding my horse over loads of stony surfaces or hard surfaces and things. I want to be able to school my horse and ride it on the grass and in the schools and things. So I don't want to have to go through that phase of transitioning them to harden their feet up.
Yeah. Okay, well, don't take shoes off then, would be my answer. If you don't want to put the time in and you want to carry on, and that's, you know, we have our horses are very expensive. If your ambition is to carry on competing and training and not allowing the horse to adapt, then actually it'd be very unfair to take the shoes off. So in that situation, I would say, you know, if you don't want to put the time and work in, then keep doing what you're doing, as long as the horse is still moving in the right way, and, you know, all those caveats that we need to put on. But I mean, I got told that I could never canter a 20-meter circle. I'd need studs to event. And don't get me wrong, I didn't event to a high level, and Buddy was really rubbish. So if anyone wants to go and look at my record, do it, because we got eliminated all the time. But he was rubbish, which is why we gave up. But I was at, where was I? Not Aston Walls. Anyway, I was at Crown Farm, Ascot-under-Wychwood, and it's very slippery there. It was in the middle of the summer. We just had some rain, and that's the worst type of footing, just so you know, where you've got a bit of dew on the grass, but the ground underneath is rock hard. That's very difficult to deal with. And I was warming up for the show jumping, and again, I ride in a considered way. I'm not doing, you know, hairpin turns around, because I know my horse will fall over. But other horses were literally just falling over in the warm-up. And they were shod and studded, and I couldn't believe it. And people were saying to me, "Oh my God, your horse doesn't have any shoes on." I had one person come out to me say, "Oh my God, your horse lost all his shoes in the ring." I was like, "No, he didn't have them before he went in, but thanks." So yeah, so I think, again, people say you can't do it. Now, I would put a caveat around that you definitely can do it. It's 100% possible, but if you want to be super competitive and you want to make the time on a twisty turny show jumping course or a twisty turny cross country course on ground that is not ideal, then you need to rethink what you're doing. Some horses can cope, some horses just can't. Again, so read the horse in front of you, see what you're doing, adjust it to your competitive mentality. Because for me, I mean, people say, "Oh, I'm sure horses couldn't go 5-star with no shoes on." I actually think they probably could. Could they be competitive? Again, I think it would depend on the horse and the rider. You just have to read the situation that you're in, and every horse is completely different. Every rider is different. So yeah, it's, again, not one shoe fits all.
And I think, you know, some of the comments here about my old trainer evented to 2-star, you know, with a barefoot horse. There are horses that are heading up towards 5-star barefoot. And I think, like you say, it's about reading the ground just as much as anything, isn't it? I mean, okay, there might be some days where you go, right, this just isn't going to work for my horse because they need more grip. But then you're probably going to be saying that with a horse with shoes, with studs, you know, without shoes, whatever. You know what ground is going to work for your horse. I mean, a shod horse with the stud in thick holding ground is probably going to do more damage to themselves than maybe a barefoot one, for instance. Perhaps, it depends, doesn't it?
Yeah, and you need to be conscious of that and look at, you know, the factors of, I mean, I hardly ever studied my horses even when they were shod, because I was so conscious of, one, injuring themselves, treading on themselves with a stud in, but also the biomechanics. I mean, if you've ever seen slow-mo footage of a studded horse landing from a fence, I mean, they are meant to have some slip to kind of take that concussive force away. And to remove that, I mean, you just see the ripples of shot go all the way up the leg, and it actually makes me want to vomit. But yeah, it's really scary when you look at it at that level, but you just have to read the situation and your personal preference, really.
I think what was really interesting for me when I took my perfectly okay horse barefoot and got asked continually why I had done it, is we were having problems. He was 6, he wasn't very balanced in his canter, and we were having real problems in the left canter at getting that left hind to sit underneath him. Now, this is a body thing he has, and I think it's also a body thing I have as well, because I'm a little bit crooked, so it doesn't help him with the left hind. But as soon as we took his shoes off, and we were in the school, because we were able to work on soft surfaces to help him out to begin with, we saved the harder, crunchy stuff until later on when his feet had adjusted. And yes, we did have to give him a little bit of painkiller to begin with, just to help him adjust, because to get to his fields and back, we're a little bit stony, like we couldn't do anything about that. But as soon as we took those shoes off and he found his feet, like literally, and to begin with, they are a bit like, whoa, what's going on here? This is a bit weird. His canter massively improved, because whatever was going on, and I don't know what it was, just not having a shoe on, whatever that was doing, it might have been the way he was being shod, it might have been the type of shoe, I don't know, but having taken that away and letting him get used to his own body was incredible. It was like almost instant for him. That obviously made a massive difference.
And for some of them it can. I mean, I say to a lot of people, I've actually got a shoe on the yard. I've actually got quite a few shoes from old horses, but I say to people, if you don't think a shoe affects the flight of the limb, hold a shoe in your hand and swing your arm backwards and forwards, and the amount that your muscles have to compensate for that extra weight. And obviously a horse is much bigger than my arm, but the principle is the same. You know, if you have a slight incorrect flight, or the limb wants to move outwards or maybe inwards a little bit more, that the weight of the shoe will affect the flight of that limb, and it's impossible for it to not happen. Even with the lightest shoes, anything that you put on the end of a horse's foot will change the way that it moves, and boots and everything. And I'm not a massive fan of boots either. I don't use them on any of my transitioning horses unless I have to. Again, Bella had them, and Bella has her snazzy trainers now for hacking, just while she, you know, changes and her feet come back. But it's really tricky. I think you have to, again, be led by them. But a lot of horses, there's a word called proprioception, which is awareness of, you know, the feet. And so for a lot of horses, they've got no idea where their feet are. And a lot of horses, I think we used to do it with the eventers and show jumpers, that you would then encourage them to kind of pick their feet up and be aware where their bodies were by doing lots of grid work and pole work. So kind of you get them to smith the poles, and, you know, they'd start to pick their feet up. But a lot of horses, if you just take their shoes off, they all of a sudden, oh, look what I've got at the end of my legs. They realise, and so that automatically improves their movement. I mean, all of mine, I've got quite a lot of pictures actually of watching them, particularly their shoulder movement in the trot, from being shod to then not being shod. I mean, the shoulder extension they can get is so much better.
Cool, thank you. Okay, so I have a question here, and I think this is a really relevant one because it was one I was going to ask you anyway, but it's actually now come in from a specific person, not the person who I was thinking about when I was going to ask you it. So Joe said, Krista, we need to have a chat. We've got several that I've taken the shoes off for everything that's happening at the moment. And I'd really like to try and keep a few of them barefoot, as there's no reason why they can't stay that way. But at the moment, oh, it's just changed, sorry. At the moment, they're crippled, so they need some help or confidence with the transition period. Now, this is a really interesting question because I know one of my dear friends, you know, Ali, she decided just before we all went on lockdown, obviously we didn't see lockdown coming, but she decided that actually she'd take the shoes off. And the great thing is that her farrier used to be my farrier, and then when I decided to start doing barefoot, I got a podiatrist to start doing it. And actually the nice thing is at that time they were both, I was still on the same yard, and when I took the shoes off my horse, my farrier understood that I was going with the podiatrist, and then they started chatting to each other. So it's really nice actually, because I've got the farrier is very open-minded to this stuff, and the podiatrist loves having a chat with the farrier. Funnily enough, they're both called Mark, as is my husband, so it all gets very confusing. But so when she then asked the farrier, I'm thinking of taking his shoes off actually, because obviously we're not training or competing like we were. Yeah, financially it might help a little bit, and that's one of the myths actually about barefoot, is that it's cheaper, and it's not necessarily at all. No, in fact, certainly not sometimes. But she said to the farrier, you know, shall I do his back feet first? He said, no, just take them off and we'll transition him. Now, that's great to have come from a farrier, or you like to call them a foot care professional, isn't it? Yes, I like that. That's a good phrase.
Hoof care professional.
A hoof care professional. Anyway, so this hoof care professional said, let's take them off. Literally, I think about 3 or 4 days later, we went into lockdown like that. And the access to our horses was taken away. That's one of those things. It is what it is, right? But she's now aware that obviously he's now in this funky transition period where she's not there to be able to do anything with him, but actually might be able to help the yard or advise if there's anything that can be done to help him through it. So I think it's the same kind of question as what Joe's asking, which is what can we be doing to help with that? And then afterwards, what can we be doing to continue the transition as well if we do get back to start riding and things?
Okay, I would love to tell you that there's a really simple answer to this, but there is not. You have to be a bit of a detective. So whenever I have horses' shoes removed, I like to do it towards the end of a cycle. So they've got a little bit of hoof wall left, just for that kind of first 2-week period, which is normally when you would have they normally feel their feet after that period. So if you've given them a little bit of extra time to kind of adjust, that always helps. So I never ever do that. I never trim. Lots of people trim just after they've taken the shoes off, and that's not good. Don't do that, please. So then the other question would be around trimming cycle. How often are you trimming? Very often people stick to the kind of traditional 6 to 8 week cycle for a shoe. Maybe start to push it out a little bit, see if that helps. Diet, as I said, is the foundation to barefoot. Gut health is very, very important. If your horse has ever had ulcers or anything like that, you have to get on top of that before taking the shoes off, because it really impacts on well, sole depth, hoof growth, everything really. If your horse has been wormed or vaccinated recently, that can have a huge impact again on footiness. So I always feed my horses a prebiotic. I normally feed Protexin at the time of vaccination or worming, just to support the gut. It seems to have a toxic reaction in the feet, and very often they will go footy. Bella gets actually a soft spot in her foot on her sole, which is terrifying, but that's just her reaction. And lots of horses do, so that's what I would recommend. As I say, diet again is very, very important. I feed all my horses Agrob's feed, so they're on very little feed. They're on the Agrob's muesli, and then I make my own like mash, which is emerald green grass nuts, the meadow nuts, not the ryegrass nuts, and the Agrob's mash, and then they're on supplements. So if they're off the grass, it's very obviously you need to balance the minerals that they're going to be not getting from that grazing. So as my general purpose supplement, I use high form oxidane, but I have Progressive Earth is a good company, Forage Plus and Equivita. I've used all of those before, but they are not stuffed with fillers and molasses and sugar. They're not sugar coated, so some horses really hate the taste, so you have to adjust that in gently. But again, only use them if you need to. If you're seeing your horses are suffering, then do it. Obviously right now we're in spring, so the spring flush is here. So if your horses are out on grass, find out what type of grass you have. Most of the grazing in the UK is ryegrass because it's fast growing, and most of our pastures were used for dairy herds and cows and that kind of thing. So that is terrible. Ryegrass is awful. If you can, overseed with a different mixture. If you're on traditional kind of meadow grasses that haven't been fertilized, then that's probably not your issue, unless there is an underlying metabolic issue with your horse that can also cause footiness and challenges. What else? Thrush. If your horse has any, so this is also my other uncommon myth. So I got booted out of one of the Facebook pages for daring to speak to a farrier about this. If there is any form of slit in your horse's frog or in their heels, your horse has thrush. Now, this is probably my biggest rant moment, because people think that thrush has to be black, thick, gunky, stinky stuff. It is not. So you need to have, if there's any form of slit, your horse has thrush. So you must treat it, because again, this will stop your horse from landing heel first and using its frog properly. If your horse's frog is withered and dying, do something about it. Even just by packing it with some, I use Red Horse products, are my go-to. I love those guys. In fact, I'm doing an poultice video for my page for Sunday Spa Day. So I'm like, oh, look at this product, and this one, and this one, and this one. But there's also other alternatives. I've got another one, hoof clay, that I use. But the point that I'm trying to make is that you want to, by using a clay or something like that, by stuffing it in the crevice, you're healing it from the outside, from the inside out. But you're also encouraging the growth, because that clay's in there, it's giving a bit of pressure, so it's encouraging that movement. And that's how horses' feet grow and how the frog develops, is by, you need to stimulate it somehow. So again, if your horse's frog isn't touching the ground, if your horse is shod, you need to get your farrier to start looking at that and trying to encourage the frog to touch the ground, because the shoe should not be the only weight-bearing surface for your horse's foot. So yeah, there's millions of reasons, but I'm happy to kind of talk through. If people want to contact me separately, I'm happy to walk through, because hundreds of questions that I could ask and find out why. But I hope that helps.
No, that's really great, thank you. And I think what that does again then is just shows that there isn't one answer to this, that it is totally bespoke, it's totally tailored, and that what you want to help people with their horses is the right answer for that horse, and that there's so much to this. I mean, we say the word holistic and people think, oh heck, we're on to crystals again, but you know, actually holistic means the whole animal, which means looking at everything. It means feed, it means turnout, it means exercise, it means body movement, it means even the rider. You know, I mean, the most interesting thing I found with taking my horse barefoot is that I can't get away with being unbalanced, because it shows up in his feet. So he lays down a lot more on his right fore to compensate for his left hind, because I'm a bit wonky. Done.
That is okay, because he can compensate for that. And they will. I mean, Buddy got stung by a bee and he grew out a magnificent flare on the opposite hind, to compensate for where he was just weight bearing slightly differently. But it happens, you know, that's life.
And I love that. And I love the fact that actually you can learn so much about them by looking at their feet when they haven't got something on it that's preventing it from showing stuff to you. Okay, so we haven't got that long left because I'm trying to keep this within an hour this time. Everyone I've chatted to, we could go way over. But is there anything you would like to just end on? A final thought from Krista, if you were, around, you know, what you're doing, what you're passionate about, where you've come from. You know, I'm just giving you a chance to think about some things at the moment. You know, your journey, anything you'd like to say to anyone about anything to do with their horse, their rehab, how they keep it, what they think, their mindset, their competition, and what life is about generally, Krista.
Wow, subject and a half. I think my biggest takeaway, and I wish more people would do, is listen to their horses. Very often they will tell you things, and try and listen however you can. You know, be quiet. If you have a busy mind, I do. It's sometimes really hard if you've had a busy day at work and then you go to see the horses, to just shut down for a minute and be present in the moment. I know that's like a buzzword, you know, but it's so important because they feed off your energy too. And so if you're not feeling great, they won't feel great either. But I suppose from a personal point of view, for me, it's taking the time to invest in yourself. I think I've spent years and thousands of pounds on training and improving my horses and buying the right kit, and you know, if I buy this it'll take 1 second off my time, and you know, I'd made a significant financial investment in my competitive career, but not once had I looked at the impact of me. Now I'm really good and I do physio, I've got regular physio and osteopathy, but my mind I'd kind of totally forgot, and that was the very last piece of the puzzle. When I was getting everything else, when I couldn't get anything else right, I was like, what can it be? So I think take the time. If things aren't going great, I wish I'd done this years ago, to be honest. I think it has a huge impact on all elements of your life. So if anyone's dilly-dallying about, you know, signing up for one of your courses, I promise you it has literally changed my life, and sent me in a completely different direction. So I am so grateful to you, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today, because I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Krista. That's really nice to hear that. And I can absolutely assure anyone listening that I didn't know she was going to say that at all. That's really sweet. So, oh, thanks. Love you too. There's a lot of love in the Flying Changes team, I have to say, because, you know, we've been really careful picking who is allowed to be a part of our team. And we always have, like, we had 30 ambassador applications for our ambassador scheme this year, and we took 10 on. And the only reason we took 10 on is because the team were all happy to rally around the guys are already here, like yourself, Krista, and other people, to actually, you know, support those people that are coming on board, because I wouldn't be able to look after that many ambassadors. So thank you so much for everything that you've done. Thank you so much for everything you've done for the horses, and your amazing knowledge and your passion and your fun and your amazing hair. Love it. There's been a comment on how beautiful your hair is always. And, like, people just seem to come on these lives and just tell people they've got good hair. Anyway, we're going to finish up now. So thank you so much, Krista. Thank you to everyone. If you've got any questions for her, we'll put her details in so that you can contact her. But From the Ground Up is just really quickly, what's your Facebook page and your Instagram?
Oh, that's a really good question. My Facebook is From the Ground Up Rehab, and then my Instagram is Krista From the Ground Up.
Perfect. So you can get in touch with her that way if you want to. But thank you so much, guys. And thank you very much, Krista. Take care. See ya.